What's up, everybody? Nick Whalen here from RotoWire. In this video, I'm going to lay out the case for why the following 4 wide receivers are overvalued in 2024 fantasy football drafts. We start at the top with Davante Adams of the Las Vegas Raiders. And look, the case against Davante Adams, it's pretty straightforward. He's one of the great talents at the position over the last decade, but there are a few factors at play here that give me some skepticism. For one, he turns 32 in December. Secondly, he lost 22 yards per game, 4 yards per reception, and 6 total touchdowns last season compared to that elite 2022 campaign when he was still with his college quarterback, Derek Carr. And 3, the Raiders, well, they're quarterbacked by Gardner Minshew, who just won the least compelling QB battle in recent memory over Aiden O'Connell. Now, you could argue that the variance and the willingness to chuck the ball downfield and play that freewheeling Minshew style, maybe that's not a bad thing for fantasy, and that's true to a degree. You know, this isn't Zach Wilson or Easton Stick quarterback in the Raiders, but we have to keep in mind that Gardner Minshew only completed 62% of his passes last season. Over his final 9 starts with the Colts, he barely topped 200 yards per game, only threw 8 touchdowns in that span with 4 picks. Now, Adams did prove last season that he is still somewhat quarterback proof. He finished as the wide receiver 10 in total value, but he was closer to the wide receiver 15 in terms of per game production. And this season, to me, you're not getting the appropriate discount that you should, given his age and given some of the risks with this Raiders offense. He's coming off the board right now as the wide receiver 10, so you still have to pay a mid-second round price for a guy who, in my mind, doesn't really have a clear path to top 10 upside. You need basically a best case scenario. Could it happen? Sure, it could, but Adams is facing an uphill battle. I've been avoiding him at cost. Hey, if you're enjoying this video, or even if you're hate watching it, whatever, please hit that like button. Please subscribe to RotoWire's YouTube channel. I know we always say it, but it really does help us out a ton. Anyway, on to the next receiver on our list, Michael Pittman of the Indianapolis Colts. You've heard me talk about Pittman before. You know I like the player, but just too many questions about what this offense is going to look like in 2024. Pittman's coming off the board as the wide receiver 16 right now in the NFFC. That gives him an ADP of about 26 overall. Now, he probably won't go that high in your home league, so you got to keep an eye on that, but we're still talking about an early to mid 3rd round pick at worst. And to me, that means you're taking Pittman at pretty close to his ceiling. I don't see much room for improvement on last season's numbers. He was targeted 156 times. He hauled in 109 catches. Both of those were career highs. And of course, the vast majority of that came without Anthony Richardson, who brings a completely different style to this Colts offense. Pittman was also essentially the Colts' only option last season. They spent a 2nd round pick on A.D. Mitchell. They're expecting to get more out of Josh Downs once he's back healthy. Pittman is still clearly the guy in this receiving core, but I don't see him putting up a 30% target share like he did last season. That was the 4th highest target rate in the entire NFL. With Richardson and with Jonathan Taylor in place, this should be a run-first Indy offense. So to me, there's just not a ton of wiggle room when it comes to Pittman's projected production versus his ADP right now. Ultimately, Pittman should have a solid floor and be a decent wide receiver too in fantasy this season. I'm not arguing that. I don't think we see some sort of massive decline, but when I'm drafting early on, I want to feel like I'm getting a player who can not only meet that ADP, but exceed the ADP. And where Pittman's going right now, he's the wide receiver 12 in ESPN leagues. I just don't think I see a whole lot of upward mobility. Next on the list, Tank Dell of the Houston Texans. Dell's the wide receiver 30 right now in NFFC drafts, which, you know, doesn't seem too bad, but he's going around pick 50 overall, which is still too high for me. I love Tank Dell. He was one of the most exciting rookies in the league last year, but I still think he's the clear number 3 in this offense, behind Nico Collins, behind Stephon Diggs. I know some people are down on Diggs, and perhaps rightfully so after that rough finish to last season, but he's one of the best receivers in fantasy through the first 8 games of the year. I don't think something, magically changed midway through the year. I think there's still some left in the tank for Stephon Diggs. Now, there's more risk than ever when it comes to Diggs, but he's only going around ahead of Tank Dell, and Diggs' ceiling maybe isn't what it once was, but I still think there's a really reliable floor there in what should be an ultra-productive Houston passing game. Overall, I'm a bit lower than market on all 3 of the Texans receivers. It looks great on paper. This should be a great offense, and it could be really good in real life, but sustaining 3 top 30 wide receivers in fantasy, that's just a really tough ask of CJ Stroud. Stroud does love Tank Dell. I'm not saying he gets completely marginalized in this offense, but of the 3 receivers, Dell, Collins, and Diggs, I think Dell's going to have the toughest time finishing as a top 50 overall player. For me, I'd rather have the security of someone like Terry McLaurin, the upside of a Jaden Reed, who you can get 20 spots later. 4th and final player on our list, Jameson Williams of the Detroit Lions. I'm just not in on Williams as a top 100 guy. I actually don't think the price is outrageous, given the pedigree, given where he was taken, but you're doing a lot of speculating on a player who's really been a deep specialist and more of this gadgety guy for the Lions so far in his NFL career. Now, the word out of camp on Williams has been all positive. Everything's positive this time of year. And he's not going to be starting the year with a suspension, which is always nice. We like that. The Lions do need a second wide receiver to emerge in this offense. That's kind of the glaring hole right now. And they're going to give Williams every chance to be that guy. But I just don't see him turning into a high volume threat this season. This is an offense that already has an extremely high volume receiver in Amon-Ra St. Brown. They have a high volume tight end in Sam Laporta. We had 120 targets last season. Jahmyr Gibbs will see more pass catching volume this year. You already saw 71 targets a year ago. The upside scenario with Williams, it's tantalizing. No question. I get that. But he had only 2 games with more than 2 catches last season. In best ball, you could talk me into the spike weeks. I think those will be there. But in redraft leagues, without the bankable volume week to week, he's going to end up being too big play and too touchdown dependent for me. All right, those are our 4 overvalued wide receivers. Again, please give the video a like. Please subscribe to the RotoWire YouTube channel. Really helps us out. Go take a peek behind RotoWire's paywall as well. All you got to do is go to rotowire.com/try, put in your email, and you're good. We don't ask for a credit card or any of that. No obligation to cancel. Very simple. rotowire.com/try.